Hello, I'm Ruth Godfrey from the University of Leicester Botanic Garden, and on this video you'll learn more about evolution and adaptation. You'll learn about how living things have changed over time and how animals and plants have adapted to suit their environment in different ways and how this adaptation may lead to evolution. Some of the words you'll need to understand is species, a particular kind of living thing that can reproduce, and remember about photosynthesis, the process by which plants use the energy from the sunlight to produce food. And remember, predators eat prey. Other words such as evolution, natural selection, adaptations, and breed will be covered in this video. About 200 years ago, scientists started travelling around the world looking at the different types of rocks around the coasts of the world's continents. They found many similarities between places that are now very far away from each other. This made scientists agree that millions of years ago, the continents we now know today were once joined together into one big landmass, which they call Pangaea. Over time, Pangaea broke into pieces, and these pieces, which form our continents, very gradually drifted apart. That our continents were once joined together is also shown by fossils. Scientists noticed that the same fossils were found in very different parts of the world. From the diagram, if you follow the green line on the right-hand map, the tropical plant fossil was found on present-day continents of Australia, Antarctica, Africa and South America, which meant that when it was growing, these places must have had a very similar climate. If you follow the blue and light brown lines on the same map, fossils of the same small animals were found in both Africa and South America. It'd be impossible for these small animals to swim across the big ocean that there is between these continents today. Instead, it must mean that the two places were once joined. Alfred Wallace, a scientist who once worked as a school teacher in Leicester, travelled to both Australia and Borneo and realised that the animal and plant life was very different in these places. Kangaroos and other marsupials are found in Australia, but not in Borneo or other parts of Southeast Asia. He invented the Wallace line, which shows the divide between one set of species and another. Charles Darwin, shown with pictures of him in childhood and as a younger and older man, was invited to be the scientist on board the ship the HMS Beagle. As you see by the map, he journeyed around the world visiting many countries. He very carefully wrote down everything he saw and found, and his records can be seen today in the London's Natural History Museum. He noticed that many animals had similar-looking, closely related species living in different places. For example, the rhea birds in the picture. In 1835, HMS Beagle visited the Galapagos Islands, a small group of islands, which is known as an archipelago, 1,000 kilometres off the coast of Ecuador. Darwin noticed there were very similar plants and animals on different islands, but they each had their own very distinctive characteristics. There were many different species of a family of bird called finches. On each island, the finches had developed different beak shapes suited to the kind of food that was available on that island. For example, large strong beaks for eating tough seeds and thin sharp beaks for catching and eating insects. Some species even used tools like sticks to help them get insects from difficult places. Darwin believed that all the different finches had somehow come from one much older kind of finch, which had flown to the Galapagos and changed into the different kinds because of the food that was available on the different islands. This change is called evolution and was known about in ancient Greece and ancient China. The problem was that nobody knew how it had happened. In 1858, Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace, who we heard about earlier, both came up with the same idea of how it happened. They said that evolution was caused by something called natural selection. For example, as you see from the picture and diagram, the taller giraffes can get more food from the tall acacia trees. Therefore, the giraffes with the longer necks are more likely to survive to adulthood, breed and have offspring with longer necks like their parents. Over time, there will be fewer giraffes with shorter necks because these do not get enough to eat, and so they often don't survive or breed and in the end die out altogether. The diagram with the beetles shows that the green beetles are not as well camouflaged as the brown beetles in the soil habitat. Therefore, they are much more likely to be eaten. Over time, there are fewer and fewer green beetles in this habitat until they die out altogether. Of course, in a grass habitat, it could be the other way around. The green beetles would survive better and the brown beetles die out. Survival of the fittest is a phrase that is often used. Those that can run the fastest from predators or survive the conditions best breed to form the next generation. Darwin elaborated the theory in a book called The Origin of the Species, which came out in 1859. In it, he explained how all life on Earth evolved by natural selection. In the beginning, just over 4 billion years ago, the first life forms were very simple, and over time they evolved different features which meant they could survive the conditions better. Descendants of the successful life forms are all around us today, but others we can only find as fossils. Natural selection has been copied by humans in a process called artificial selection. For example, our domestic dogs have been carefully bred from wild wolves by choosing or selecting which animals to keep and breed from. In fact, the different types of dog and cow and horse and cat we now have are all called breeds. We sometimes make some very unusual looking animals by doing this, such as the Labradoodle pictured below, which is a cross between a Labrador and a poodle. In similar ways, farmers have been breeding plants to make them better to eat. The top pictures are the wild forms of wheat and bananas, and the bottom pictures are the cultivated versions we eat today. It's a good thing we have a cultivated version of the banana, because the wild ones have seeds so hard that they would break your teeth. All living things need a source of food, a way to reproduce, and to be able to survive the conditions of the place they live. This may include a way to protect themselves from predators, or special features to survive harsh weather conditions. A quick reminder of what plants need to live. For photosynthesis, the process of producing food by using the energy from sunlight, they need water, the light, and carbon dioxide from the air. They also need a small amount of nutrients, such as iron, nitrogen, and phosphorus, usually from the soil, and warmth to grow. The evidence of how animal and plants have evolved to be a successful species where they live is everywhere. Some animal adaptations are behavioural, such as hiding in a burrow during a hot day, or migrating to a different country for part of the year. The next part of this video will look at a few examples of adaptations that show adaptations in the animal's body rather than just behavioural, and adaptations in plants. Examples of animals that have had to survive the cold are Arctic fox, bears and seals. Arctic foxes have a summer coat and a winter coat, each coloured to help them be camouflaged for summer and the winter snow. The thick winter white coat is very insulated to help keep them warm. Their ears are small to reduce heat loss, but pointed to help them hear prey under the snow. Bears also have a thick coat, but this is greasy, so it gets rid of the water quickly after swimming. They spend all summer eating as much as possible and able to store large amounts of fat, so they're able to hibernate over winter. Seals live in the cold sea all year. They have thick blubber, a special type of fat to help them keep warm. To reduce heat loss, their ears are inside and they have very small limbs. How do plants survive? The winters in the UK are too cold for many plants, and the water in the leaves could freeze and kill them. Deciduous trees lose their leaves, rest or are dormant over the winter, and then regrow their leaves to photosynthesize in the warmer spring. Evergreens keep their leaves, but they are thick and needle-shaped, so any snow falls off rather than breaking the leaves. Some plants grow in favourable conditions and then die back, and their bulb is stored underground. Bulbs are modified stem, leaves and a shoot, which will then grow again in the right conditions. Many plants only survive a year. These are called annuals, but their seeds survive over the winter, ready to grow in the warm spring. Plants that grow in extreme cold and windy places, high in mountains known as alpine climates, or in the Arctic, have further adaptations. As soon as the snow starts to melt, they flower so they can produce seeds as soon as possible, and the new plants have maximum time to grow before the weather turns cold again. Many have tiny leaves, and some are cushion-shaped to protect them from being blown away in the wind. Some even grow protective hairs, you can see in the picture. Then the very dry conditions, such as deserts. Camels have a store of fat in their hump which can be converted into water, special sprayed-out feet to walk on sand, adapted long eyelashes and nostrils that can protect them from sand. Fennec foxes have big ears, which, as well as being very useful to hear prey, help them get rid of extra heat. Roadrunner birds have adapted so they don't need to drink at all and get all the moisture they need from prey. It reabsorbs all moisture from its poo before releasing it, and instead of releasing excess salts through urine like most birds, it releases it from its eyes. Scorpions have a very hard exoskeleton, that is a skeleton on the outside, which protects it from the heat. It can survive on little food and no water and is able to slow its body systems down so it's almost dormant, but can then spring out at lightning speed to catch prey. Cacti that live in very dry conditions often have leaves that have adapted to become spikes, as large flat leaves would cause the plant to dehydrate very quickly in the hot sun. The spikes protect them from being eaten by animals and also collect dew, any early morning dampness in the air. This trickles off the spikes to the ground where it can be absorbed by the roots. However, the spikes can't collect enough light to perform photosynthesis to make the plant's food, so the photosynthesis happens in the stem. Other desert plants can photosynthesize in the leaves, as they have a very thick, waxy coating that prevents dehydration. But what about the opposite condition, too much water? For those that spend a lot of time swimming, such as fish, penguins and otters, they are very streamlined. Salmon and other fish have gills so they can absorb the oxygen from the water and don't need to come out of the water to breathe. They have a tail and fins to help them move efficiently in the water. Salmon are also incredibly strong and can leap up small waterfalls as they come back to the freshwater river where they were born to breed. Otters have a strong tail to help them swim, a warm waterproof coat and fur on the bottom of their feet to keep them warm. It also helps them grip on slippery rocks when out of the water. Penguins' wings have adapted to the extent they can't fly, but they are very good swimmers. Mallard ducks have webbed feet to help them swim and to balance when near slippery rocks and mud near the water. Their beak is well designed to collect plants that grow in the water to eat, as well as insects and worms. Water lilies have extra air in their stems and leaves so they float on the water and can trap as much light as possible to photosynthesize. The leaves of plants in the rainforest could break if large amounts of water settled on them, so they need to get rid of it as efficiently as possible. Some leaves have a waxy surface where the water pools in droplets and runs off. Others have drip tips and are slightly curved so the water is channeled down and drips off the end. Most animals have the advantage they can move if there isn't enough food and go somewhere where it is more abundant. However, plants can't move, so have adapted to maximize their chances of survival. So many plants grow together in rainforest it is very dark, 50 times darker on the forest floor than in the light. Some trees go very tall indeed to reach the light. These are known as emergent. The picture on the right shows how big the buttressed trunks can grow at the base of these enormous trees. Other plants grow very big leaves or grow on plants already tall. The lianas hang from tall trees, and the red bromeliad shown grows on tall trees rather than using energy to grow from the ground. The majority of food a plant creates uses photosynthesis. However, they do need a small amount of minerals from the soil, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium and iron. In some marshy areas, the soil is very acidic and doesn't provide all these minerals. So plants have adapted to track insects to gain these minerals. Venus flytraps shut very fast. Sticky sundew are sticky and the insects get stuck, then the plant gradually rolls and absorbs the nutrients. Pitcher plants have red stripes on to look like meat, so the flies are attracted to them. However, they slip down the hairs and are trapped and can't escape drowning in the liquid produced by the plant that absorbs the nutrients. David Attenborough, the famous nature TV presenter from Leicester, who is shown here, has a newly discovered pitcher plant named after him. You will now understand much more about evolution and how plants and animals are adapted so they can survive in the habitats they live. The pictures on this slide were all taken at the University of Leicester Botanic Garden. Can you see any adaptations they have that would help them survive in their natural habitat?